Hey everyone, Temporal here, and we are going to be doing an Ask Temporal. This one obviously inspired by the Reddit thread in front of us. And it's a question I've seen before. It's probably a question I've talked before, but not specifically in its own video. And that is, how are comms handled in high-level organized play? And I've worked with a lot of different teams, contenders teams I've worked with in three different regions, we'll pretend, probably four really, as well as what was I saying? As well as lots of high tier three teams that were trying to work their way in, collegiate teams who have hired out my services, all that good stuff. So I've seen a fair bit of this, and the way that comms tend to get broken down is into a couple major categories. So I'm going to go ahead and start with those here. And those major categories are going to be, at least how we're going to organize this, will be target calling. So that's one thing. Beautiful handwriting, I know. Ult tracking. That's another thing. Then we also get into, we've got our fight planning. Oh yeah, yellow on white, wonderfully done. Fight planning. And then what we're also going to get into is going to be a callouts. So I think I've covered everything that I want to topic-wise there in terms of our major places. So we're going to go ahead and go through that. The actual fight caller as well, we could say. So we also could get in here fight call. So 5 categories, and we'll come back to each of these. So now that we've done this here, what we're going to start with is we're going to start with target calling. And target calling tends to take one of 3 different formats on a team. You've either got one person doing it, which sometimes you have someone who can just mostly do that. They are the one doing the call. They say what the target is, they say who they should be attacking, and they have to be able to go ahead and call targets that are not the target that they themselves are currently working on. So they have to be able to, if it's your Reinhardt calling, for example, the other Rein that he can swing at isn't always the right target, so he has to be able to call to be on the Mei, to be on the D.Va that's off angling. And that would be one type of calling. But to do that, they're going to have to be fed information from callouts. They're going to have to be getting scouting, location, cooldown information. So even though they're the person doing the target calling, the rest of the team is still in the callout section going to have a responsibility to the whole comm structure. So you can have target call setups where one person is doing the calling. You can also have target call setups where 2 people are doing the calling. I find that's pretty common as well. I call it two-headed, where you have one person who's got a pretty limited range, like maybe a Reinhardt or a Winston doing the calling, and a second person in this meta that might be like a Mei or a Zarya, who is a little more range, but also is going to be, hey, this is a source of damage doing the calling. And you try to set up a priority between them. If everything is equal in terms of the personalities, the vocalness of those two, I would generally have my Zarya or Mei player be the superior target caller, as in if they're making the target call, that is the one that trumps the other one. And your second person should know that they're going to try to get the calls on to the first person's target, but there's a little bit of back and forth on that. The primary would be get onto the person, say that's your Mei, your Zarya's calls. That's going to do more for you, at least in a brawl world, but you still want your Reinhardt calling stuff, or you want your main target caller calling stuff, and everyone else should generally be aware. It's not a hard rule that they 100% in all situations are going to be shooting at something that's being called. Sometimes a McCree is going to run into another McCree on the off-angle battle, for example, and they're going to take that fight regardless of what the target calling sounds like. But they are aware that, hey, I want to be listening to those if I can, if it doesn't seriously cost me anything. If it's as good to shoot at their target as the target I'm on, I want to swap over and get onto what's being called there. So one target caller or 2 target callers are both very common ways to do this. And you get the, hey, if you have 2 target callers, they sort of understand that they have to line up. You sort of understand which target caller has priority. But if you can't get on, say, your primary target caller's call, you still have, or if your primary target caller's in spawn and can't call very well, you still have another target caller there. And if you're getting on that target, there's still a real chance of getting eliminations because you have damage coming from one of those people. So that would be the 2 main ways. That would be 2 of the ways of doing it. The third way that target calling tends to happen for teams is you can have Socratic or echo calling, where you just go, hey, we have our comms. everyone is going to participate in target calling. Everyone is going to do some targeting. If we have determined that our team is actually on it enough, actually paying enough attention to each other, not also focused tunnel vision on their own thing, that they recognize when other people are calling other things, and they're all consciously and consistently making an effort to get on each other's targets. So they might be calling like monkey, monkey, ball, ball, tracer, blah, 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 blah. And they recognize that, and each of them that might have started calling 3 or 4 different targets are making an effort to get onto someone else's target with their calling because they're hearing it, they're seeing it, and then they all consolidate in on yes, monkey, or they all consolidate in on yes, tracer, or whatever the case may be there. Tracer generally not early in a fight, but they're all able to consolidate like that. So you can have one person calling, 2 people calling, or your last method would sort of be an echo calling method where you're calling what you're on, what you can get on, and you're actively making an effort to get onto each other's targets, and you're shrinking it down very quickly because time matters a lot in Overwatch, especially while the battle is going onto that one person's target. These tend to be the ways that target calling get organized. The next thing that I want to cover topic-wise is ult tracking. This is a pretty basic one. Ult tracking, your primary method is going to be you have one person, they are doing the ult tracking. Your one person is doing the ult tracking. They are going to go into that either between fights or in the cleanup phase of the previous fight to talk about what ults the other team is expected to have coming into the next fight. It's possible as someone is still learning ult tracking, as someone is still getting it, as someone is, maybe still learning the ropes a bit, that they won't actually do all the ult tracking themselves, but they'll still at least have a responsibility of triggering the team to actually do as a team the ult tracking between each fight there, so that it actually happens between the fights. That said, you do want to grow into a situation where one person can effectively mentally store that information. The reality is everyone at high levels is going to be doing some level of ult tracking, but you do want to get to a place where that one person can try to unload as much of it as they can onto them take up the only one taking up that mental space, free up a little more mental space for the other people, even though, yes, there is still going to be some degree of course, they're tracking some things. You just do that when you play enough Overwatch. So that's what you're working towards, one person doing the calls. If in the beginning you have that one person responsible for making sure that the ult tracking happens, that's okay. Then what you move on to is going to be, we are not going to use yellow, what you move on to is going to be the fight planning. And your fight planning is what happens between fights. And you'll notice I said, hey, let's go ahead and get our ult tracking done sometimes in the cleanup phase if we can, when it's like, hey, it's a 6v2, we're just cleaning this up, our comms don't need to be that strong, we can start talking about the next fight. So you do your ult tracking then, or if you have to do it between fights, that's fine, but that ult tracking informs your fight planning. And again, for fight planning, I like to have one person own it, and most teams do have one person own it, where this person owns the fight plan. They are the one who has to make sure that a plan happens, and they are the one who is going to come up with the plan the majority of the time. Now, again, while people are learning, and sometimes just on teams that are more Socratic in general, you will have, okay, one person makes sure the fight planning is happening, but it's a little more democratic in how it happens and coming up with the ideas, and that's okay, but you still do want one person that is in charge of making sure that it happens, and you want that one person to immediately be able to put their foot down on my plan. They have to be able to go my plan or something along those lines, because if things start getting wonky where like 3 different people have plans, or 2 different people are fighting over the plans there, that one person has to own it, even if they then get challenged in VOD review later, even if between games, between matches, the team goes, that was a terrible plan. That's perfectly fine, but they have to have the authority to insist immediately on their plan rather than take time, because Overwatch does not have infinite time between team fights. You have to be able to settle in on a plan there. So you can sometimes have multiple people in. Some teams will do, hey, we expect to win with this ult this fight, so we're going to have this person sort of take over the plan. That thing can happen, but mostly they're going to narrow it down on one person is sort of doing the fight planning. Then we sort of get into the fight caller, and for our fight caller, we are covering it with things like that. Like, yes, you might have your target calling, that could be part of your fight caller, but you're also going to have, hey, we need to make sure that we've got rotations covered. We need to make sure that we've got stabilized calls covered in terms of if we need to do a mini lead, a little reset. We also might be looking at things like, hey, we need to very quickly go ahead and change our plan. Like we need to immediately come up and execute and explain a new plan in the middle of the fight. That could be on the fight caller. Those are all things that can happen. Some people will, again, some teams will occasionally go, hey, for our fight caller, we're actually going to have it owned by whoever is driving the most powerful ult in this fight. That may be our Blade, that might be our Blizzard, that might be our Grab. Some teams will do that. Not the biggest fan, but that is a thing that happens. And I should be clear, even though I'm listing different things here, target calling, ult tracking, fight planning, fight caller, callouts, these are not like, oh, a different person owns every single comm role. It's very common for multiple of these comm roles to belong to the same person. For example, one of your target callers and your fight caller are very likely to be the same person. Your ult tracker might be the same as your fight planner. It might not. Your fight caller could be the same as your fight planner. Not always the case, but absolutely can be. And then finally, we've got callouts. That's going to include scouting information of where enemies are. That's super important. That's going to be about important CDs like Ice Wall came out, Ice Block came out, no Wraith, no boosters, things like that were like no nade, things like that are very important cooldowns are going to get called, as well as when people are actually low. And, you should know where they are because you should have had your location, scouting calls, etc. And those have to belong to everybody. Some people on teams will be less quiet than others, but everyone has a responsibility to scouting calls like that, to call outs, again, those important CDs, those actual low health calls. Everybody has to contribute on those, at least to some degree. So that's an everyone responsibility. So those are kind of the main things and how comms are generally structured in pro play and high-level organized play. I think I've covered, those are different roles. So I'm going to pretty much leave it there, and now I'm going to move on to questions. And if you were just here for the high-level breakdown, that's great. You've got it now. You sort of understand this is how comms work. Other than actually listening to them, this is as good an explanation as you're going to find anywhere. I have worked with a lot of teams. Okay, so question. Semitic, what role usually takes fight planner? Tank support. So your fight planner is generally going to get taken either by the person who did your... It's frequent for your fight play. It can belong to anybody. It's frequent for it to belong to either your ult tracker or your fight caller. And fight callers are frequently main tanks, for example, and those are frequently target callers as well. You don't want to overload anyone with too many comm responsibilities because their actual play deteriorates a little bit. But it is helpful to be, hey, I planned the fight, and now I'm going to drive the fight. It can also be helpful to go, hey, I tracked the ults, and now because I tracked the ults, and because I shared my ult tracking, but I was tracking the ults the whole time, I had a little more time to think about what our plan should be, and I made my plan based on the ults. Sometimes, on the other hand, you're going, hey, we're spreading out the mental bandwidth in more places, so that we're going, this person is ult tracking, and they don't need to think about the plan. This person is calling the fight, they're calling the rotations, they're calling the targets, so we want someone else to call that. So support and tank are common roles for that. Specifically, main support and main tank are common roles for the fight plan there. But like I said, it can really belong to anybody. It really can. It just depends how you do your comps there. And even though I might say something like main tank can make a good target caller, main support makes a good ult tracker, these things are definitely true. Zarya could be a good target caller. Mei could be a good target caller. You end up overruling these things for who has the best comms for it on your team. You try to develop people, but you work within the realities of your team. That is going to be so much more, even at the highest levels, that is going to be so much more important than, oh, well, officially it's best if we do this person doing this. No. I have had teams where our flex DPS was the best fight caller as well as the best fight planner by far, so that was what he did. I've had teams where, the main tank was very, very quiet, and while that isn't your preference, if their mechanics, their judgment is good enough, you will absolutely accept that and let someone else control your rotation calls, your target calls, etc. Hello, new to the stream. Hope I learned something. Happy to hear it, No-Go. What's the difference between a fight caller and a target caller? So your target caller is specifically calling, what target are we shooting at? Are we shooting at Mei right now? Great. That's fantastic. Are we shooting at Reaper right now? Great. That's fantastic. Like, those are things that we need to know that we have someone calling. Whereas a fight caller is more happy to go, okay, we're going to go ahead and stabilize. We got out Ice Block, or maybe we got their Rein eliminated, so now we are up one, and now we are going to stabilize, or we're going to stabilize behind this corner, or hey, we got out their window, shoot, back. Your fight caller will frequently be the same as your target caller, or one of your target callers, but is not necessarily the same thing. Those are different comm roles, because you might be going, hey, we're backing up from the window, we're stabilizing after we got an elimination. We are forcing our plan was to win with Blizzard, so we are pressuring them until we get Zarya bubbles out. That would be the difference. I hope that answers that well for you. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys another minute or two for questions here, and then if I don't see anything interesting, I'll go ahead and call it. In the meantime, if you guys are enjoying the stream, please do like and subscribe. That really does help me out. And if you are looking to get questions like these answered, get VODs reviewed, get general Overwatch stuff, this is a great place to do it. And if you want me to be able to do more of this, liking and subscribing really does help. In regards to target calling, that reminds me a bit about Dive. I learned, is it right that Zen or Tracer scouting calls first target, then Winston calls next target since he's the least mobile? So I do like having someone who's kind of immobile, like a Reinhardt, like a Winston, be one of your target callers, but like I said, Semitic, I do not want you to hard lock. Like the Rein has to be the target caller, the Winston has to be the target caller, the Zen has to be the dive call, has to be the one who calls who we're going to dive with because of their Discord. I don't want you to lock on that too hard, because while there are slight advantages to some of those things, you do end up going, no, the reality of the situation is that our so-and-so player is more vocal, is better at the target calling, is better at this, and they end up in a target calling role. If your Genji's your best target caller, you're going to put him in a target calling role. If your Zen is super quiet, you're going to accept that if your Zen is good enough otherwise to be on the team. But they have to be good enough otherwise to be on the team. Like, your comms are part of how you're judged as a player, but you're not going to go, our Zen 100% has to be a target caller because they have Discord. And part of the reason you're going to do that is, while that's really helpful in Zen metas, that's a lot less useful to you when your Zen is playing Ana or BAP, etc. The fight planner talks in the pre-fight and sets up the initial engage different from the fight caller. You got it. No questions, just wanted to say I really like your content. Thank you, Kona. Any tricks for building target calling confidence in solo queue ladder? Just do it. Literally just do it. You can then sort of record your game and review, was I calling good targets? You can then, even if you don't record it, look at the replay and try to remember what you're doing and actually look back and figure out, hey, was I actually calling good targets, or was I just calling what was accessible to me? Because it shouldn't be hard for you to call what's accessible to you, and you passively calling what's accessible to you is fine. Like, if you're doing passive calls of Rein, and then you go Ash, and you get more, you bring up the tonality, you get more extreme in your call when there's something that you actually need your team to take advantage of, that can actually be good because you're still bringing some focus fire. There's actually a chance of taking down the Rein because your damage is on it. If someone else puts their damage on it, that's real. And then you make that hard call and you make it more concentrated, more extreme. Your team is going to get that, and your team is going to get that it's a harder engage thing, but you need to yourself recognize, wait, am I calling the right targets? Like, I might be swinging at the Rein, but it might be appropriate for me to actually be passively calling D.Va, because even though D.Va is the only thing, or even though Rein is the only thing I can swing at, that D.Va on high ground needs to be removed, so I need to be communicating to my poke DPS, even though I'm not swinging at them, to move the D.Va. That's kind of what I'd recommend there. In terms of just building confidence in it, if it's just like a I don't like talking thing, that's fine. I don't care. Just do it more. Literally just do it more. Talk more. You can mute everyone in target call if you want. You can literally mute everyone so you can't hear them in target call, and you're actually still going to be helping your team as long as you're not doing an absolutely terrible job of it. Going to give everyone one more minute for questions here. Once again, like, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. That's awesome. Or if you're looking to get coaching yourself, you can join my Discord in the description below. You can also submit some questions like these there if you have them. And for this, we are going once. I've heard people do the muting thing. Sometimes people will mute you when you're target calling too, and that's fine. You just have to accept that, yeah, they're going to mute you because you're target calling and they don't want to hear it. Yeah, I know, but everyone does it, and that's why calls have evolved for actually one, really one, absolute one, because people abuse one. What are you going to do? That's all you got to do. There's not much else you can do there. Okay, I think that covers the topic, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out here. Thanks, guys. Temporal out.